Hello, my name is Daniel. Thank you for being here with me today. If you enjoy real, heartbreaking cheating stories from Reddit, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and leave a comment to share your thoughts. It really means a lot to me. This is a story that's been haunting me ever since I read it. It's about a man whose trust was broken in the most painful way, and even after years of trying to mend what was shattered, he finds himself unable to love the same way again. The story begins with a man named Ethan, who is now 39 years old, living in a quiet neighborhood outside Portland, Oregon. He had been married to Rachel, also 39, for more than a decade when their lives suddenly collapsed. Just over 2 years ago, Ethan discovered that Rachel had cheated on him with a coworker during a company Christmas party that was held out of town. To her credit, Rachel told him the truth the very next morning, but to say that Ethan was devastated would be an understatement. His world felt like it had collapsed overnight. What made it even harder was the timing. Almost immediately after her confession, the country went into lockdown. With the world shutting down, they were trapped in the same house, unable to escape the suffocating weight of what had happened. Ethan described those early days as a blur. He moved through them like a ghost, angry and heartbroken, yet desperate to understand why the woman he trusted most could betray him. Because they had no real option to separate at the time, he tried to work through it. To Rachel's credit, she did everything she could to repair the damage. She quit her job, cut off all contact with the coworker, and volunteered for therapy and counseling sessions. She even confessed her infidelity publicly to her mother and sister, both of whom were horrified. She became unusually tender and attentive toward Ethan, almost as though she were trying to rebuild him piece by piece. At one point, in a desperate attempt to even the scale, she suggested that he should sleep with someone else. That remark, though meant to show her willingness to do anything, only cut him deeper. It wasn't what he wanted. What he wanted was the loyalty he thought he already had. Fast forward 2 years, and by outward appearances, things seemed normal again, at least for Rachel. She no longer walked around their home on eggshells, no longer broke down in tears when the subject of infidelity came up. Ethan even recalled how she once cried while watching a soap opera where a wife cheated on her husband. Slowly, she seemed to be healing. But for Ethan, the passage of time had not dulled the pain. Instead, it reopened the wound. The return to normalcy felt unbearable to him. It was as if life had reset, throwing him back into the memory of that night. He admitted that he thought about Rachel's betrayal more often now than he did in the 2 years prior. He didn't look at her with disgust, but rather with emptiness. He found himself asking why she was still even in his life. That absence of love terrified him. What made it worse was the guilt. Ethan knew how hard Rachel had tried to repair the marriage. She had given everything, her job, her pride, her reputation, just to try to make things right. Yet, he couldn't stop the growing feeling that he wanted to leave. He confessed that it made him feel like the bad guy, even though logic told him otherwise. He didn't hate Rachel, that was the truth, but he no longer loved her either, and the knowledge that leaving would destroy her tore him apart. A part of him wished he had been strong enough to walk away the moment she confessed, instead of dragging both of them through years of painful half-healing. When Ethan finally shared his story online, he asked if anyone else had been through something similar. He wanted advice, guidance, maybe even validation. The responses poured in. Many told him that his feelings were natural, that love cannot be forced once it's gone. They reminded him that he had tried, and that no one could fault him for eventually realizing he couldn't stay. Some readers pointed out that Rachel's effort to make amends was admirable, but it didn't erase the betrayal. A relationship is built on two hearts, and if one has stopped beating with love, the other cannot carry it alone. Others said that staying out of guilt was unfair to both of them. Rachel deserved a partner who could love her fully, and Ethan deserved a life where trust wasn't a daily battle. Ethan admitted that their reconciliation hadn't been wasted. Those years showed him Rachel's remorse, but also made it clear that his love had quietly faded. It wasn't malice that kept him from her, but simply the weight of what had been broken. As one commenter put it, "This is why cheating is such a deal-breaker. Trust, once lost, is almost impossible to rebuild." With the support of strangers, Ethan began to see what he had been too afraid to admit. He was ready to end the marriage. He knew it would devastate Rachel, and he knew he would question himself for years to come. But he also understood something else. Staying in a hollow marriage out of pity would only deepen both of their misery. And so, he made the decision to speak with her, even though the words felt like a death sentence. When Ethan finally sat down with Rachel, he carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. He told her that he had read through the responses from strangers online, and that some of their reflections echoed exactly what he had been feeling inside. He explained that while forgiveness had come in time, forgetting had never been possible. And now, with life returning to normal, the memories refused to stay buried. He admitted that the strange comfort of lockdown had given him a false sense of control. During those long months, Rachel had always been by his side. He knew where she was, what she was doing, and there was no space for suspicion to fester. But now, for the first time since the betrayal, she had started going back into town, seeing friends again, living a life outside their home. And Ethan's mind became a battlefield he couldn't silence. Who was she really with? Why was she running late? Why did his chest tighten every time her phone lit up? The words poured out of him, raw and trembling. He told her that while he valued everything she had done to repair the marriage, he could no longer continue. He could not pretend to be whole when inside he was splintered beyond repair. Rachel broke down. Her sobs filled the living room, and Ethan wept alongside her. They cried together until their faces were swollen and their bodies felt emptied of strength. She clutched his hand and begged him to stay, to find another way, to give them just one more chance. Her words echoed through the silence. "Do you still love me? Will we ever see each other again? Isn't there anything left we can try?" They sat together for hours, often without speaking, just letting the clock tick as their marriage bled out in front of them. Ethan admitted later that he thought she was asking those questions not because she believed in an answer, but because she was trying to hold back the inevitable. And in the end, inevitability won. Rachel packed a bag and went to stay at her mother's house, while Ethan prepared himself to file for divorce. It would be simple to place all the blame at Rachel's feet, but Ethan refused to take the easy way out. He confessed that he felt just as broken, just as miserable as he had on the morning she first confessed 2 years earlier. He wasn't walking away with triumph, nor with relief, but with a hollow grief that seemed endless. "I know people will tell me I've made the right decision," he wrote. "They'll say it's what I needed to do, but there's no way to ever be sure. No matter how much I repeat it to myself, I'll always wonder if leaving was truly the right choice. Because in this story, there are no winners. Everyone is miserable. Everything hurts. And here I am again, reliving the most painful chapter of my life just to share it with strangers online." Ethan admitted he didn't mean to sound bitter. He had received an outpouring of genuine support from kind voices on his first post. But the truth was that even kindness couldn't drown out the storm inside him. He was struggling. He felt small, lost, and uncertain if he would ever feel whole again. He closed his update by saying he wouldn't return to that account anymore. The act of putting his heart on display had drained him, and he didn't have the strength to keep reliving it through comments or follow-up questions. He thanked those who had reached out with compassion, but said he needed to step away. When readers saw his words, many agreed with one thing above all: there were truly no winners. Cheating leaves a mark that no apology, no therapy, no desperate plea can erase. Both Ethan and Rachel had suffered, and neither would walk away unscarred. Some commenters admitted they had been through something similar, and reading Ethan's story brought back their own pain. Others wished him the best, reminding him that strangers can still empathize deeply even if they will never meet in real life. One person wrote that they hoped someday Ethan and Rachel might both look back and see that the split was, in its own way, an act of mercy. Staying together would have meant more silent tears, more empty questions, more aching nights. Ending it now, though devastating, might one day be the beginning of peace for them both. The community left their thoughts, some hopeful, some mournful, but all carrying the weight of empathy. Ethan's story was not just his alone. It became a mirror for everyone who had ever faced betrayal, heartbreak, or the impossible decision to let go of someone they once loved more than life itself. And with that, his story faded quietly into the digital void, leaving behind nothing but echoes of grief and a fragile hope that healing, however slow, might still find its way to him someday. It still felt surreal that everything had spiraled so far, and what struck me most was how lucky my boyfriend had been not to involve the police. At 19, living in a small town outside of Cedar Falls, I had never thought my cousin would be the one to make me feel unsafe. A part of me almost pitied her for not realizing the damage she had caused, but that sympathy was drowned out by the emptiness I felt every time another family gathering went on without me. It wasn't my fault, and yet I was the one paying the price. Sometimes I wondered if the rest of the family had actually seen the messages, the relentless texts, the explicit photos, and the words that crossed every possible boundary. If they had seen them in full, would they still excuse her behavior the way they seemed to? Or had the story been twisted and softened, reshaped to protect her image? It ate at me quietly. I understood why I couldn't be around her, because I didn't want to be, but the cost was being absent from people I loved. That emptiness made the betrayal sting even more. I read through comments and advice from others who heard what had happened. One person pointed out the obvious, that what she did wasn't some harmless crush. It was harassment. She sent things that no one should send, especially to someone who had been clear he wasn't interested. It wasn't just uncomfortable, it was predatory. It was invasive, and it stripped away the safety I should have felt within my own family circle. Another person said what I hadn't dared to put into words, that she had acted like a stalker. She ignored not only my boyfriend's feelings, but mine as well, as though our bond meant nothing, as though her shallow fantasy mattered more than the pain she left in her wake. That was the hardest part for me. Knowing she was my cousin, someone who should have cared, made her betrayal unbearable. It wasn't about looks or obsession, it was about complete disregard for family, for trust, for decency. Reading those words made me feel less alone. People said I should make sure my parents truly understood, that maybe even the whole family needed to hear the truth directly from me. They reminded me that withdrawing forever would only give her more power, that she shouldn't get to steal my connection to the people I love. But even knowing that, the thought of standing in the same room with her still made my chest tighten. Another piece of advice stayed with me: to go to family functions anyway, and if the subject came up, calmly and firmly state the truth. to hold my ground with quiet strength in front of my parents or grandparents so that my maturity was undeniable. I wasn't sure I had that strength in me yet, but I wanted to believe I could find it. Others encouraged me to share the messages with the family so they would understand that this wasn't an innocent crush. It was harassment, something that could have ruined more than just relationships. Maybe they didn't realize how dark it had gotten, how much she had crossed the line. Maybe they thought it was just youthful foolishness. But I knew better. I had lived it. After weeks of hesitation, I finally made a decision. I couldn't keep carrying this weight in silence. Taking the advice I had gathered, I decided to call a family meeting. Not in person, I wasn't ready for that, but on Zoom, where I could speak from the small bedroom in my parents' house with the door closed, heart racing, but hands steady. That Saturday, we gathered virtually. My parents sat in one square beside me. My cousin Amy appeared with her parents, their faces stiff. My grandparents joined from their living room, quiet and watchful, while two of my aunts connected from their kitchens. The little grid of faces felt overwhelming. I knew this conversation could shift everything, for better or worse. As I looked at their faces on the screen, I realized I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting to reclaim a place in my family that had been stolen from me. My voice shook as I unmuted myself, but I didn't back down. I was tired of being silent. The truth had to be spoken, no matter how heavy it felt. It was the first time I had seen my cousin Amy since my parents had sent her back to her own home last year. Even though it was only through a screen, just the sight of her made my stomach twist. My chest tightened as if I was reliving everything all over again. I laid everything bare for the rest of the family. I told them about the messages she had sent to my boyfriend, the cruel voicemail she left, and the pictures that she had sent, though I spared the details, only giving enough a description so they could understand how indecent and humiliating they were. Amy was furious. Before I had even finished speaking, she began to scream at me. Her voice cut through me like broken glass, sharp and merciless. She hurled insults, swore at me, and even spat out the F slur more than once. It was endless. The core of her rage boiled down to the same thing, that I was a horrible person spreading lies about her. I asked calmly if anyone wanted to see the screenshots of the messages she had sent to my boyfriend, proof that could not be twisted or denied. Amy immediately shouted that they must have been faked, her voice breaking with anger. When she finally calmed down, I told everyone plainly that this was exactly why I felt so unsafe around her. She had crossed boundaries that should never be crossed. She had invaded my privacy, harassed the person I loved, and never once had she shown any sign of remorse. There was no apology, there was no recognition of the pain she caused, just silence until the moment she decided to paint herself as the victim. My grandmother's voice came next, gentle but heavy with guilt. She told me I should forgive Amy, that it would make things easier for everyone if I just let it go. The words pierced deeper than I expected. I had to fight back tears as I said that forgiveness could not come without a genuine apology, not just to me, but to my boyfriend too. How could I forgive when she was still acting like she had done nothing wrong? That was when the weight of the family turned against me. My nan and my aunts began to scold me, saying I was tearing the family apart over something so small. Their voices overlapped, rising higher, each word pressing down on me. I wanted to scream that it wasn't me, that it was Amy who had shattered everything. But before I could, my mom's voice cut through the storm. She said that Amy was lucky my boyfriend hadn't decided to go to the police after everything she had done. The silence that followed was chilling. My mom's words carried the truth none of them wanted to admit. She went on to say that if the family thought I was the one at fault for not forgiving Amy, then maybe we needed space. Maybe it would be better to cut contact, at least for a while. My Nan didn't take it well, her face twisted with disapproval, but my mom stood her ground. It wasn't the outcome I had hoped for. Deep down, I wanted them to see me, to understand the pain Amy caused and the scars that lingered. Instead, I was left with the heavy realization that my family would rather blame me than confront the reality of Amy's actions. The idea of going no contact with part of my family hurt, but maybe it was the only way forward. Maybe distance could give me space to breathe again, to heal from the mess she created. Still, as I sat in front of that screen, hearing their voices clash and fade, I couldn't help but feel hollow. Families are supposed to protect each other. They're supposed to stand with the one who was wronged. Instead, they chose silence and excuses. They chose Amy. And all I was left with was the suffocating weight of being seen as the problem when all I had done was tell the truth. Maybe it is a kind of small victory that my parents stood by me. My mom's words gave me a thread of strength to hold on to. She reminded me that Amy should be grateful she wasn't facing real consequences for what she did. But still, the way the rest of the family turned on me so easily showed a truth I had been trying not to face, that blood ties are no guarantee of love or even of fairness. Amy broke this family long before I opened my mouth. She crossed lines that should never have been crossed, and instead of holding her accountable, they turned their anger on me. I don't know what comes next. Maybe more drama, maybe more pain. But for now, the only thing I can do is step back. I can't force them to see what they don't want to see. And maybe with distance, I can finally begin to move on. When the call finally ended, the silence in my apartment felt heavier than ever. I sat there staring at the blank screen, my heart still racing from everything that had been said. At 30 years old, I should have felt stronger, more capable of handling the chaos, but instead I felt small, worn down, and tired of carrying the weight of a family that refused to see the truth. The walls of my little place in Portland seemed to close in on me, reminding me of how isolated I had become. Even with my mother standing up for me, even with the truth laid bare in front of everyone, the blame still found its way back to me. It was as if my pain meant less than their desire to keep things neat, to avoid facing the ugliness of what Amy had done. I wanted so desperately for someone, anyone, to look at me and simply say, "I believe you. I'm sorry you went through that." But those words never came. Instead, I was met with accusations of selfishness, of being the one who tore the family apart. The saddest part is, a piece of me still longs for their acceptance. Despite everything Amy did, despite the humiliation and betrayal, I still find myself wishing my grandmother would look at me with warmth instead of disappointment. I hate myself for wanting that, because I know I deserve better. I know I deserve a family that values my well-being over appearances. But here I am, sitting in the dim glow of my apartment, wondering if cutting ties is the only way I'll ever find peace. The truth is, Amy broke us. Her lies, her cruelty, and her refusal to take responsibility left wounds that may never heal. But it feels like I'm the only one willing to face that reality. Maybe time apart is the only solution left. Maybe the silence that follows will hurt less than the constant reopening of old scars. Tonight, as I lay awake listening to the hum of the city outside, I know I have to protect myself. Even if it means losing them, even if it means carrying this sadness a little longer, I cannot keep pretending that everything is fine when it isn't. Stories like this echo deeply because they reflect situations many people face today. Toxic relationships are not limited to romantic partners. They often exist within families, too. Sometimes the hardest truth to accept is that people who should protect us may instead dismiss our pain or even blame us for it. When that happens, the natural instinct is to hold on, to keep fighting for recognition and love. But the reality is that clinging to unhealthy dynamics only prolongs the damage. If you find yourself in a similar place, the first step is acknowledging that your feelings are valid. No matter how much others minimize your hurt, you are allowed to draw boundaries. Protecting yourself is not selfish, it is survival. If someone repeatedly violates your trust and refuses to show remorse, you are not obligated to welcome them back into your life just because they share your blood. Family is important, but respect and accountability are more important. It also helps to lean on healthier connections, whether that is a supportive parent, a trusted friend, or even a therapist. Healing requires safe spaces where your experiences are believed and honored. Writing down what happened, like keeping screenshots or journaling, can serve both as validation and as a reminder to yourself when others try to twist the narrative. Above all, remember that walking away does not make you weak. It makes you courageous. Choosing peace over constant conflict is one of the hardest but most powerful decisions you can make. Healing takes time, but with each step toward healthier boundaries, you reclaim your dignity, your strength, and eventually your sense of belonging.